X Windows. In this nugget, we're going to look at the X Windows windowing system. We'll talk about some of the terminology associated with X Windows, and then we'll look at the configuration file and the various parts of that. And then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of fun and look at X Windows in its most bare bones form. All right, well, let's get to work. Let's start our discussion of X Windows by talking about X clients and X servers. Okay, now this notion of client and server is actually a little bit backwards from the way that we normally think about it. Normally we think about a server being located somewhere remotely over the network, and we get some service off of it. And then the client is our local machine. All right. Well, for X Windows, this is a little bit backwards. Okay. Here's our local machine here. Well, the X server is what runs on our local machine. All right. The X server is responsible for drawing graphical output to your monitor. Okay, then X clients can run on any machine out there. They could be running on these machines over here remotely over the network, or they could be running on your local machine. No matter where the X client is running, it gives graphical display information to your X server, and your X server draws it to your monitor. Okay, so that's the way you have to think about clients and servers with regards to X Windows. Now, Red Hat uses an X server program called X-free86, which is a very common X server program that's out there. Now, in terms of clients, there's just a zillion clients out there. It's zillion X clients. All a client is an application program, and like we said, it uses your X server for output. Now, what are the application programs that are out there? What are the X client programs that are out there? All sorts of stuff. Clocks, calculators, spreadsheet programs, mathematical drawing programs. All sorts of stuff is out there in terms of application programs, whatever you need practically. Okay, these X clients have a common set of command line options to control how they're displayed. Okay, so the first one is -display option. Okay, now this option tells what server that you want to display the output to. Okay, so you could be running a client remotely over the network, but you say -display like nugget :0.0. That's going to display locally on the machine nugget. And you always have to put that :0.0 to say that it's that local machine. Yeah, that's part of the specification there. All right, then you give a geometry to the window that is holding this X client, that's holding this application. So you would say first X size times Y size, and that would give the dimensions of the window that you want to open for this X client. Now, if you say something like here, like 100 by 300 or something like that, then it's going to be 100 across and 300 up and down. Okay, that's the X and the Y size. Now, what is 100 and 300? What does that mean? Well, if you're talking about an application like a clock or a calculator, then it's talking about the number of pixels. Okay, so it's 100 pixels wide by 300 pixels up and down. Okay, if you're talking about a terminal window, though, like Xterm, something where the output in the window is actually just characters, then X size times Y size will actually be the character depth. So like X size, like if I said 80 times 40, that would be 80 characters across and 40 lines up and down. Okay, so it's just a little bit different for Xterm. Pretty much everything else is counting pixels. Okay, there's also a +X offset and a +Y offset if you want to control where it comes up on the screen. So X offset would be the offset in pixels from the left side of the screen, and Y offset would be the offset in pixels from the top of the screen. Okay, and then there's a font name that we can give for the particular window, so we can use a particular font inside that window. Title, we can give a name to the window up in the very top of the window, stuff like that. And there's other options out there that you can check out in the info pages and the man pages. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the X font server. If I just clicked on the right thing, there we go. So every X client that's giving graphical display information to your X server is using some sort of font in it. Okay, and the way that Linux controls these fonts is with the X font server. All right, Red Hat has a script called XFS that it controls the X font server service. Okay, and this works like any other service. It works like networking or whatever. We can start and stop the service manually. We can make it so that the service starts up when the system boots up, that kind of thing. Okay, now sometimes the X font server just causes problems, and I've listed out 4 checkpoints here that you can do, and these are 4 requirements that must be met for the X font server to function properly. So first, the XFS service must be running. All right, if we stop this service, then the X font server is not going to work. That seems pretty obvious. There must be free space on /temp and /home for the font server to work correctly. The fonts must be configured correctly in XF86 config, and we'll talk more about XF86 config here in a few minutes. Okay, and then the fonts must exist in your path. So user x11r6 live x11 fonts is the directory where the fonts should live. And if you're trying to specify some font in xf86 config, for instance, if you're trying to use some font that doesn't exist in your font path, then obviously that's not going to work either. So there's just 4 checkpoints that you can look at if the font server is not working correctly. Okay. Now let's just talk about configuring X windows. Okay. There's a few tools out there to configure X windows. Probably the preferred tool is on Red Hat is Red Hat-config-xfree86. This is replacing the old tool called Xconfigurator. Okay. Alternatively, you can run xf86 config, which is more of a text-based tool. This one's more graphical. Okay, so these are the 2 preferred ways to configure X from scratch. If you just need to make small changes, you can manually edit the xf86 config file that's in etc x11. Okay, now I don't recommend editing this file or creating this file from scratch to configure X windows, because there's just too much stuff in the config file to just do it all by hand. Okay, so but if you just need to make minor changes, then you can manually edit this file. One thing to be careful of is if you're manually adjusting this configuration file, be careful if you're adjusting the refresh rates for your monitor. Okay, especially if you're on a laptop. If you put in refresh rates that are faster than what your monitor can handle, the X server will refresh the monitor faster than it can handle, and it'll just fry it. Okay, and that's a real expensive problem in laptops. Okay, for the monitor on my desk, I think I got it on sale for like 99 bucks. Okay, so if I fried it, I'm out 99 bucks. If I was on a laptop and I fried out my monitor, there's no way I'm going to get out of it with just $99. Okay, that's going to be a very expensive. I'm going to end up just replacing my laptop if it's kind of old and the monitor parts aren't available anymore, and so on. Okay, so this is something you have to be very careful of, is if you're manually adjusting refresh rates. All right, now this xf86 config file has a bunch of sections to it. Okay, so let's talk about the various sections of this file, and then we'll move out to the Linux screen and look at some of this stuff firsthand. Okay, so the first element of the xf86 config file is called the server layout, and this is like the top level description of the X server. Okay, and basically it's just going to specify which of the other things that you're defining down here are being used, and we'll see that in a second. Okay, so the file section, that talks about the location of fonts, colors, and so on. The modules section talks about which modules to load for your X server. So there's all these various options that you can have for your X server, and you can just pick which of those you're going to need, and you load those as appropriate. Okay, input devices defines keyboards, mice, and things like that, like how many keys your keyboards have, how many buttons are on your mouse, that sort of stuff. Monitor defines the monitor's capabilities, like we were talking about, refresh rates, resolution capabilities, that sort of stuff. Device is for graphics card information, so the brand name or the chipset on your graphics card. And then the screen defines things like resolution and color depth. Okay, so between all these options, you're really defining the X server in whole, and you can define under any one of these things, you can define multiple input devices or multiple monitors or multiple devices, and then under server layout you can pick and choose which one you're using at any given time. Okay, and if you're moving around from computer to computer, then that's where this makes sense, right? So that if you're moving from computer to computer with different hardware, different graphics cards, things like that, you can have one xf86 config file that controls all those different systems. Okay, now let's move out to the Linux screen, take a look at an xf86 config file, and then let's take a look at some Windows before window managers take hold. So we haven't even gotten to talk about window managers yet. Window managers control sort of the next layer of display output, and let's just look at what the windows look like without window managers, and then we'll bring in some window managers and talk about which ones are available and how to use them. The first thing I want to do here at the Linux screen is just show you a quick little tour of the info page for the xf86 config file. So if I type apropos, remember this from the introductory videos, and I'm going to type xf86 config. Remember, apropos just searches through all the man pages and info pages for every one that contains this word xf86 config. So I'm going to do that, and it brings up 2 entries here. one of the entries, the first one, has a capital X, F, and C there, and that is the info page for the configuration file for X386. That's the one we want to look at. The other one that it brings up is all lowercase x, f, and c, and that one is the actual configuration program, the text-based one that I just told you about on the whiteboard, and that's the program that generates an XF86 config file. Okay, I just want to actually look at the info page for the configuration file itself, so I'm going to type info xf capitalize 86 config. All right, now this is the info page for the actual configuration file. And this info page is long. It's probably, I don't know, 50 pages long or something ridiculous. Most of the stuff in this info page you're never ever going to use. But I want to let you know it's here, and I want to sort of show you how it's laid out so that you can find something in here if you need some detailed piece of information. So I'm going to page down here a little bit, and I'm just going to show you this section here. So the section names are as follows, right? Just like I listed on the whiteboard. Okay, it gives you the name of each section and a little quick description of what it does. Okay, what that section is responsible for. If we page down through the info page, you'll see here it starts and it's laid out in sort of the same way. There's a file section in the info page that tells you the various things that you can do in the file section of the XF86 config file. Okay, so if you need to set a font path, you say font path and you specify the path inside of double quotes. Okay, and that's how you set a font path in your config file. If I page down farther, you'll see there's a server flag section. If I page down even farther, I think next is modules. There's the module section. Okay, so if you want to load a particular module when X Windows starts up, you would say load, and you would put the module name in quotes. Okay, if you want to see what modules are out there, you can see here it says to see what font and extension modules are available, check the contents of the following directories. So if you go in there, you can poke around to see what extensions and modules are available to you that you have on your system. Okay, page down further, there's the input device section. Okay, each of these sections starts with an identifier. Okay, so the identifier is just like some name that we choose so that we remember what that is that we set up. Okay, so I could name this, you know, keyboard 0, or I could name it like, you know, maybe I bought a bunch of Hewlett-Packard keyboards for this network, for this environment, and I could name it like HP keyboard or something like that. Okay, and so you can name the identifier name is just your way to remember it. Then the rest of the stuff is things that you specify that has to be particular to the way that the XF86 config file is expecting it. Okay. And we'll look at an XF86 config file here in a second, and you'll see how this is set up by the configuration programs. Okay, I'm going to page down a little bit more. There's the device section, and then you know, we go down further, more even still, and then there's going to be then there's going to be the monitor section. The video adapter section. They say here nobody wants to say how this works. Maybe nobody knows. We don't want to know anything about it either. Okay, so I'm not going to break the silence of the vow of telling people how this works. I don't really even know either. So okay, so we go down further and you can see all the different options. Okay, there's the mode section and so on. Okay, so there's a little tour of the info page for this. Now let's go back out to the Linux screen and look at the actual the configuration file that the configuration program set up at installation time. All right, well now let's look through the XF86 config file that was generated by the installation program. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type more /etc/x11 /xf86 config. Okay. Fingers are a little rusty today. Alright, so here's the file. We're going to go through it page by page. The first thing here is this, the first section that's in this file is for the server layout. Okay, this is like the high-level description of what the X server is set up to be. Okay, and you can see here under the identifier given to it is just the default layout. Screen here is screen 0, input device is mouse 0, input device is keyboard 0. These identifiers here, screen 0, mouse 0, keyboard 0, are the names that the installation program gave the various sections down below. So when we go down below and look at the mouse settings, the identifier for that mouse setting is going to be mouse 0. So here, by saying that the screen that we want to choose is screen 0, the input device is mouse 0, that says go ahead and use the settings down below in the file that were set up under those names. Okay. The next section here is the file section. This is where we load the RGB path and the font path for the colors and the fonts for our X Windows. Here is the modules section, and you can see there's the various modules that get loaded. Okay, then there's the input device section. Notice all the comments here. Okay, everything that starts with a sharp sign or a hash mark here, this is a comment. It's not read by X Windows when things start up. This is for humans to read to get an idea of what's going on in the file. Also, if you make changes to a file, an XF86 config file that other people use, that other people log onto this computer and use, you should comment your changes in the comments so that people know why things were different, why things were changed. If something's not working for them, they can go through this file, look for recent comments, and say, then they can come to you and say, hey, you know, you changed this and that's messed up something the way that I did it, and then you can work that out. Okay, so it's always good to document your changes in the comments of these configuration files. Okay, so here is our keyboard setup here in the input device section. So you can see the identifier is keyboard 0. That's what we referred to back up in the server layout section. And then it says, okay, what's the driver I use, the keyboard driver, and what are the various options that I want for my keyboard. You can see here it's a 105 key keyboard, it's a US style keyboard, that sort of thing. Okay, same goes for the mouse down here. The identifier here is mouse 0, the driver's mouse. What's the options? It's a PS2 mouse. I want to emulate 3 buttons because I only have a 2-button mouse, that sort of thing. Okay, and that's how you set this up, and then these identifiers are the ones that get used up in server layout. Okay, so I don't want to go through all of this. We kind of have the idea now how it works. You know, there's the monitor section, the device section, the screen section. So the screen section is kind of like another of the higher level things, and then up in server layout we chose screen 0. In screen 0 we said we want to use video card 0, monitor 0 that were just defined above. We want to have a default color depth of 16-bit color, and then we want to have 800 by 600 resolution, which seems kind of low, but that's what I need for recording the videos here. Okay, so that's the simple tour of the XF86 config file for you. All right, now comes time for some fun stuff. Okay, now maybe you're not going to think this is as fun as I think it is, but at least it's instructive. So, you know, pay attention even if you think it's boring, because you're going to learn something, right? But the reason I think this part's fun is because what we're going to do now is sort of deconstruct what X Windows is. Okay, we're going to look at just the part of this whole windowing system that X Windows is responsible for. Now, a lot of times when we think of X Windows, you know, we think of this graphical user interface that's in front of us, right? We've got these windows, we've got these icons, taskbars, all this kind of stuff. We can drag windows around by clicking on the top thing and sliding them. We can minimize windows by clicking on that button and get them back by clicking on this thing at the bottom. Okay, and you know, that's our windowing environment, and a lot of times we just think of, well, there's X Windows. But X Windows is actually responsible for a very small, critical piece, but a very small piece of this whole, what the whole look and feel is of our desktop. Okay, X Windows is working in combination with a desktop environment and a window manager to give this thing like the complete look and feel. We're going to talk all about the various desktop environments that are available on Linux and the window managers that you can use with those, and we'll talk about some of the subtleties of those in the next video. Okay, but since this is our X Windows video, I just want to deconstruct this and show you exactly what X Windows is responsible for. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to kill our X session here. We're going to go out to the console window, and then in the console window we'll type some commands and then start up X clients in X environment, but it's going to look very, very different and sort of primitive and weird, but it's going to give you the feel for what X Windows is doing underneath all this other stuff that we see on the screen. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is get out to the text-based console window, or just like the text login screen for our computer here, Nugget. And the way that we're going to do that is hit Control-Alt-F1 all at the same time. Alright, now forgive any weirdness that happens in the video here, because what's going to happen is when we do that, the resolution size of the screen is going to change on my computer, and some other weird things are going to happen. So just ignore that stuff and keep track of what is actually going on. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm just going to hit Control-Alt-F1, and we're going to log into this computer Nugget, and then once we're there, then we'll stop the X server that's running on Nugget, and we'll start up things one by one, like X clients and so on, without the help of a window manager or desktop environment. Okay, so Control-Alt-F1 is our first step. Let's hit it right now. And here we are at the beautiful text-based login screen. Okay, this reminds me of the VAX VMS that we used when I was in college. You sat in front of this little monitor that was hooked up to this big mainframe, and this is basically what it looked like. Okay, so I'm going to type my login name. I'm going to type my password here. Okay, and now I'm logged in to Nugget in the text-based version, okay, and without any graphical user interface stuff going on. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is switch over to be the super user because I'm going to stop some processes here or change the run levels. Actually, what I'm going to do, I typed that incorrectly. My nimble fingers for today. Okay, so now we're logged in as root, and the first thing that I'm going to do here is change the run level over to run level 3. Remember from the introductory videos, changing things over to run level 3 will stop the X servers and will be, you know, sort of in the more single user mode kind of interface. Okay, it's not actually single user mode, but it's just the mode that's without X Windows interface. Okay, run level 3. All right, so I'm going to do that, and that's going to stop. See, it says switching to run level 3, sending the term signals. A couple other lines are going to pop up here for things that have been stopped. Okay, and now we're back to our prompt. Okay, now we've stopped that. Now what I want to do is I want to start X Windows up sort of independently of a window manager or desktop environment. Now the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to type capital X, that's the command to start X Windows, and then I'm going to put the ampersand after it so that it starts in the background. Remember that from the introductory videos too, is this will start X Windows as sort of a background process. And again, our screen resolution is going to change, and you're going to see a real primitive version of X Windows showing up here in a second. So I'm going to hit enter, and then we're going to see you know, the new or the primitive version of X Windows pop up here. All right, and here it is. We've got an X on a black screen. Okay, so this is X Windows. This is X Windows at its most primitive form. All right, this is not very exciting at all. So now what I want to do is I want to go back to that console screen again. See, I find this to be really fun. I know you guys are probably not thinking this is quite as fun as I do. But okay, so this is X Windows in its most primitive environment. We're going to switch back to the console screen again, and now at the console screen we're going to start up some X clients, and then they're going to pop up on this screen when we come back here again. So let's go back to the console again. Again, Control Alt F1. We'll go back to the console, and we'll be right where we left off. All right, so here we are back at the console. I'm just going to hit enter here to get a command prompt back up. It printed some messages to the screen while we were gone. We don't really have to look at those. But now what I want to do is I want to type, I want to start up a display here. So in that window, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type xterm minus display, and what I can do is I can just type localhost :0.0. Okay, so this is going to start up an X terminal. There's our X client option. Remember, we were talking about the options that we can give to X client. One of those options is minus display, and localhost is the place that we want the display to be. So it's going to display on this machine that I'm on right now. Okay, I'm going to put an ampersand after that again. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. All right, now I do that. Background processes is started. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to switch back out to that X window display, the one that was the ugly black screen with the X on it, and we do that by hitting Alt F7. So I do Alt F7, I'm going to go back out to that display, and I'll see you there. All right, well here we are. We've got our X terminal window now in our X session, okay, and it doesn't look anything like what we saw before when we had the desktop environment and the window manager working for us too. This is only X Windows that's working right now. Okay, so what can we do in this terminal window? Well, we could do anything we could do in a terminal window before. We can type ls, we can cd up to the etc directory and do an ls and pipe it through more and so on, and look at that. I can hit Control-C. Okay, all the stuff I could do in a terminal before, I can do in this terminal now. What I can't do is deal with this window, right? I can't move this window around. I don't have a title bar up here to click on and drag. I don't have a minimize or maximize or a close button up here. The only graphical thing I have available to me is this scroll bar over here, right? That's the only thing that I have available to me, okay, in terms of graphics. I can type any of the commands I could before, I just don't have all the graphical capabilities. All right. Now there's other X clients that we can start from this terminal window. All right, let's look at some of those. They're in user x11r6 bin, and let's list the ones that start with X. So I'll say LSX star, and star stands for anything. So anything that starts with X we'll list, and here's a big list of things that start with X. These are all X clients that we can start from the command line and have them show up here on the screen. Okay, so let's type xclock first. Okay, so I'll type xclock minus display localhost :0.0. Okay, so I'll do that, I'll hit enter, and boom, there's my xclock. All right, well, where did it show up? Its default for showing up was in the upper right-hand corner. All right, well, that stinks because now I can't even read my whole screen anymore. I can't move this window because I don't have any of these title bars. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Control-C and get it out of the way there. All right, now I can start it. I'll do the same thing I did before, use the history, the up arrow there to get back that same command. But now I'm going to add on the geometry qualifier. So remember the other options that we could use when we start up X clients. There's display and geometry are probably the two most common ones. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 50 pixels by 50 pixels big. Okay, and I wanted to situate it down here in the lower right-hand corner. And remember, when I told you about the offsets as part of the options for geometry, you would say something like plus 100, plus 200, and that would move it in 100 pixels from the right and 200 pixels from the top. Well, you can also work from all the other corners too. Okay, if I put in a -0 here instead of +0 +0, well, -0 relates to the lower right-hand corner. Okay, so this says 0 pixels from the right and 0 pixels from the bottom. Okay, so let me just hit enter here. I'm going to put an ampersand so it runs in the background. And now we've got our xclock again running. It sits down here in the lower right-hand corner. It's 50 pixels square. Okay, but I still can't move it or do anything. That's all window manager stuff. Right? Another one that's pretty fun in here is xeyes. Okay, so I'm going to type xeyes, same thing again. Okay, minus display localhost :0.0 minus geometry. I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. And now I want this one, let's put this one up in the upper right-hand corner. So how would we do that? Well, we would do 0 pixels from the right, that was -0, and 0 pixels from the top, that's +0. Okay, so the first coordinate is always the X offset, the second coordinate is always the Y offset. Okay, and again I'll hit ampersand to put it up there, and there's the xeyes. Notice they'll just follow my cursor around. You can go right in between and make them cross-eyed. Okay, somebody had a lot of time on their hands, right? Okay, so if you're paranoid and you don't like people watching you, maybe you just want to kill this process. I just kind of like doing this and making the eyes all jiggy. Okay, so this is X Windows at its primitive. I think this is really neat because now when we go to talk about desktop environments and window managers in the next video, then you'll see sort of, okay, well that's what the desktop environment and the window manager provides on top of X Windows. This is all X Windows provides. We can run all sorts of applications. We have real functionality. We're just losing all that nice stuff that the graphical user interface provided that we're used to. That, a lot of people just think that's X Windows, but it's not, and that's what this little lesson here shows you. Okay, so so that's it. So now let's wrap up and wrap up what we did in this video. Alright, well it's time to wrap up our nugget on X Windows. We first started by talking about the differences between the X server and the X client and got some terminology straight there. Remember, the X server runs on your local machine and it's responsible for displaying the graphics to the machine. We talked about the XF86 config file, looked at the info page for that, and also scanned through the one that was created by our installation program. Remember the configuration programs, Red Hat config, XFree86, and XF86 config. This one's graphical based, this one's text based. We actually looked at this one in the introductory videos. I didn't even go through these in this video just because they're so self-explanatory. They just follow exactly the same steps that we went through in the installation program in the introductory videos. You fill in a monitor type, a screen resolution, and video card, and that sort of stuff. This is very self-explanatory. Then the hotkeys that I mentioned while we were doing that little exercise at the end, remember Control-Alt-F1 takes you from an X session or from a graphical session to the text-based console or the text-based login screen, and then Alt-F7 takes you from the text-based screen back to the X Windows session if you've already started one of those. Okay, so that wraps up this nugget on X Windows. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it informative.